So here's a puzzle for you. How does a religion all about peace, humility, and forgiveness manage to win over some of the most hardcore warrior cultures in history? That's exactly what we're digging into today. The incredible story of how Christianity didn't just convert the Germanic peoples of early medieval Europe, but was actually changed by them in a huge way. Okay, let's get right to the heart of the conflict. On one side, you've got the Christian ideal right from the Sermon on the Mount, being poor in spirit is the goal. But on the other side, a line from the Old Norse Eddas that says the only thing that never dies is your reputation, your fame. I mean, these two worldviews are just on a complete collision course. And that brings us to the big question, right? How in the world do you bridge a gap like that? How does a faith that tells you to turn the other cheek even begin to make sense to a culture where personal honor and vengeance are pretty much everything? It seems completely impossible, but the answer is one of the most amazing examples of cultural adaptation you'll ever see. To even start to crack this puzzle, we first have to understand the world these Christian missionaries were walking into. We need to get inside the head of a Germanic warrior and really understand their unique code of honor. Now, one of the tricky things for historians is that at first, the Germanic peoples weren't writing their own histories down. So a lot of what we know comes from their neighbors and, well, their enemies, like the Romans. It means we're seeing them through an outsider's eyes for sure, but it's still a really revealing perspective. At the absolute core of their society was this thing called the comitatus. And this wasn't just some army unit. It was the social glue holding everything together. It was a band of warriors who swore a personal, literally unbreakable oath of loyalty to their chief. Everything, and I mean everything, revolved around this bond. The Roman historian Tacitus gives us this incredible window into just how intense this vow was. Your chief's bravery, that was the bar you had to meet, period. And the ultimate, most humiliating shame, something you'd carry for the rest of your life, was to survive a battle where your chief had died. This was absolute ride-or-die loyalty. But, and this is crucial, it wasn't a one-way street. The reason this bond was so powerful is because it was reciprocal. The chief had to deliver too. He was expected to provide weapons, feasting, and the spoils of war. It created this incredibly tight social fabric built on mutual trust and obligation. Okay, so you've got that fierce, honor-driven world of the comitus in your head. Good. Now let's pivot and look at the completely different set of ideas that Christian missionaries were bringing into these lands. You know, the message of early Christianity was just radically different. The focus wasn't on fame in this life or glory in battle. It was all about salvation in the next life. The most important virtues were things like humility, mercy, and peace, pretty much a direct challenge to that whole Germanic ethos. And nothing, I mean nothing, shows this clash better than the Beatitudes. Just listen to these words. Blessed are the meek, blessed are the peacemakers. You can just imagine a Germanic warrior hearing this and thinking it sounded like a recipe for weakness and, frankly, dishonor. So this is the million-dollar question, isn't it? If you're a missionary, what's your plan? You can't just show up and say everything you believe is wrong. That's a surefire way to get rejected, or worse. So how did they pull it off? Well, the answer, and this is where it gets really clever, was not to replace the Germanic worldview, but to remap it. This is the moment where Christianity doesn't just convert the Germans, it kind of gets Germanized itself. Their strategy was something we'd now call enculturation. So instead of saying your values are bad, they basically said, hey, let us show you how to apply those amazing values you have in a new Christian context. They decided to work with the cultural framework they found, not fight against it. And maybe the most shocking example of this whole process is how they reimagined the Beatitudes themselves. You remember the original words we just talked about? Okay, now get ready for the Germanic remix. Look at this. It's almost a perfect inversion, and we actually find versions of this in early medieval texts. It praises the rich, the strong, and those who get their revenge. Now, of course, this was not official church teaching, but it shows you just how powerfully those old warrior values stuck around and got blended into the new faith. So how did this synthesis actually play out? It's like this. They didn't get rid of strength and courage. They just redefined them as spiritual strength, the courage to fight for Christ. That fierce loyalty of the comitas wasn't erased. It was just transferred from a human chief to Christ, the ultimate heavenly Lord. And honor? It wasn't about personal glory anymore, but about the honor of defending the church.
So what was the long-term result of this incredible cultural fusion? It created something totally new, a European Christendom that had a warrior's spirit beating at its very heart. And this, right here, is the key takeaway. The faith that took root in Europe was a hybrid. Sure, it had the theology of Christianity, but it was often animated by the spirit, the ethos of the Germanic warrior. In a way, Christianity had conquered, but it had also been changed by what it conquered. And you can see the results of this everywhere in medieval culture. The new ideal hero becomes the warrior saint, a holy person who is also a fighter. This warrior spirit is what directly paves the way for things like the military holy orders, the whole concept of chivalry, and of course, the Crusades, actual wars fought for a heavenly lord. This little story about Saint Odo just captures the new ideal perfectly. Here's a guy who wants to be a monk, a man of peace, but he just can't give up his identity as a pugnator, a warrior. So what does he do? He does both. He literally hides his monk's haircut under his cap and just keeps on fighting. He's the perfect blend of these two conflicting worlds. So, what's the big takeaway for us? Well, it leaves us with one last really fascinating question to chew on. This fusion happened more than 1,000 years ago, but it literally shaped the foundations of Western civilization. So you have to wonder how much of that ancient warrior code, repackaged as spiritual courage, loyalty, and honor, still echoes in our culture, in our stories, and even in our values today.